They were saying that the plane was about to arrive, but the Americans injected him with a poisonous substance. The Americans entered my house, planted bombs on the doors, and detonated them. Most of the time, there were cases where, in a single night and at one time, they martyred 2 civilians.
If my father had been alive, I could have completed my education properly and I could have reached my goals.
Paktia, a land of mountains, tall pine trees, honor, bravery, sacrifices, and devotion. We present the documentary of a bloody incident by the occupiers and the sacrifices of the local people from one of the famous and richly blessed with the Eternal Lord's natural beauties districts of this very region. This is Zazai Yub. A mountainous district that has always raised the cries of freedom throughout history. But one night, a sorrowful night, this region fell victim to the cruelty of the occupiers. A raid, a tragedy, and 13 innocent people whose lives were taken. Zazai Yub, an important district of Paktia, is known for the unity of its tribes, traditional lifestyle, sacrifices, and struggle. It was 12 o'clock at night, when the wave of sleep had swept over the people's homes. But suddenly, the sound of helicopters, the cries of the civilians, the shouts, and the gunfire of the invaders spread terror across the sky of Zazai Yub. In this raid, carried out by NATO and American invaders, an attack was launched without any distinction, during the night. Women, children, and the elderly were all forcefully taken from their homes, and 13 innocent people were martyred. The invaders destroyed homes, trampled on books and Qurans, tortured and martyred ordinary civilians. This is the tale of the invaders' cruelty and barbarism, a story that our people experienced repeatedly every night, while the world stood silent in the face of it. The stories of the victims. Who were they? Terrorists? Militants? No. They were local people, prominent elders, farmers, scholars, elderly men, and children. The foothills of the mountain, a peaceful embrace of nature, but it also carries with it a history of horror and fear. There, a father lost his sweet life in exchange for his love for his land. And a child, who had not yet forgotten the warmth of his father's embrace, was subjected to the bitter and terrifying moments of orphanhood. He did not understand the meaning of war, but the flames of battle reached the very edges of his life. He had never heard the sound of weapons, but the blast of bombs silenced the melody of his childhood. He had listened to the sound of his father's footsteps, but today, from the green slopes of the mountain, the cries of silence rise. This is not just the story of one orphan. It is the cry of thousands of children who bear the burden of the oppressor's cruelty and terror on their shoulders. Let's listen to the heartache of this child, Masood, and knock on the door of the world's conscience.
Around
9 years ago, my father was martyred in this raid. This is our home. When we came out of the house, the raid began. As he tried to escape toward the mountain, but he didn't stay. He left, and as he was climbing toward the upper side, the Americans came from the lower side. At the same time, an aircraft was circling overhead. As he tried to climb up toward the mountain, he was shot from the plane.
Masood was just 9 years old when he was deprived of his father's love. He had no one to help or support him, and that pain still lingers in his eyes, like a living image, for others to witness.
It was a huge blow to our family because there was no one else in our home. At that time, we were just children. I was around 9 years old, and we had no one else to support us. If we had found someone to help us, maybe it would have been easier, but we were left alone. It was very painful. It brought a lot of hardship to our family.
Had his father been there, he would have learned. He wouldn't have had to wrestle with the burdens of life's sorrows, nor would he have been swept away by the caravan of grief and worries.
If my father had been alive, I could have completed my education properly, and I could have reached my goals. That's why I always wish he was still with us. We would have been happy. But these sorrows and worries weigh heavily on us.
At the scene of the incident, we found another child whose innocent face bore the shadow of a world full of sorrows. This child was so small that the story of his father's martyrdom hadn't yet been etched into his memory, but the album of his father's memories and stories, passed down by others, pains him deeply.
I was very young when my father was martyred. He was martyred by the Americans. It happened a long time ago. I was just a small child. I don't remember much of the story, only what people tell us. It has caused us a lot of pain and suffering. Our uncles say it was around 3 o'clock at night when the raid happened, and they martyred. I go to a madrasa. I leave for madrasa at 7:30 in the morning and return at 11 o'clock.
For Uncle Jumanor, that Friday night was no less than Judgment Day. His young son became the target of the occupiers' bullets. The breath of the injured youth was shortening, his eyes half open, and with one hand, he gripped his father's hand tightly, as if it were the last hope he had to survive. This old man was crying out, but the silent village of Zazai Yub and the sky were mute to such cries, for every person was lost in their own grief. The old mother could not bear to see her injured son in the clutches of death. Slowly, she climbed up to the roof to check the situation of the occupiers, hoping they had left so she could get her wounded son to the hospital. But as soon as her foot touched the roof, the occupiers silenced her heart's cry. Another silent target, another pain, and another terror. A veil of sorrow had settled over Uncle Jumanor's house. The wounded body of his son, the blood of a mother on the roof, and the innocent cries of the father that were tearing at people's hearts, yet the earth remained silent.
One of my sons was martyred in it. His name was Ramatullah. When we came out of the house, the raid started, and it became clear. They went further. When they came on foot, they shot here and pushed some of them back. Then they came back to the house. When they returned, there was a lot of chaos. They told the family, "These are our brothers," and called out to them to take me to the clinic, to the hospital. His mother, my wife, went up to the roof, and they threw a bomb. The bomb fragments hit her, one on one side of her thigh, and the other on the other side. She pulled me down, and both were injured. The Americans smelled my hands and said, "You have done jihad, your hands smell of it." I told them that I was laying bricks. I didn't carry weapons.
The invaders wrapped Uncle Jumanor's son in a blanket, wounded, and carried him on a stretcher to take him to Bagram. But near the White Mosque, they injected him with a poisonous substance and martyred him there. His mother, months later, succumbed to her severe wounds in the hospital.
I received him and took him out of the house. When we carried him to the road, he couldn't even be carried in a blanket, so I asked for a stretcher, and they gave me one. We put him on the stretcher and took him to the White Mosque. When we arrived there, the Americans gave him injections of poison. They gave him poisonous injections. They didn't take him to Bagram or anywhere else, they took his life right there. My wife was also injured. I took her to the emergency clinic. She lived for 1 month, then we took her to Peshawar, Pakistan. She had been hit twice. Out of those 14 people, one was my son and one was my wife. On the other side, 2 sons of Nanak were killed in the house, 2 small others were killed during that raid. Our village suffered a lot of injustice, a lot of oppression at that time.
We lost our children, but not our honor. In this incident, alongside the other villagers, 2 young girls from Gul Mat's family were also affected. Their own eyes bear witness to the pain and innocence, telling the story in their own way.
When the Americans entered my house, they threw bombs at the doors. They took rods and broke the trunks. The children were sleeping, and at that moment, I put my children inside the basement and told them that a raid had come and they might be caught. When I took them inside the room, I separated them from the women and told them, "Be brave, because now the Americans are entering here. You go that way, move away. Take the women to one room, you have business with the men." I put the women in one room. The children who came out were covered with black cloth and were captured. They beat others on their faces and also started to beat them severely. The days we went through, only God knows. We suffered such oppression as if, just then, we would sit and cry to the Almighty. We had no power, we pleaded with God. "O Allah, you have sent this hardship upon us, please take it away from us." We had no other hope or support. What could we do? Where could we go? There was no place to go. "O Allah, be merciful to us. O Allah, be merciful to us."
The invaders had mourned in such a way that even the sky above Zazai Aryub seemed to weep. Grief and fear had wrapped that night in their claws, and the villagers were exhausted from gathering the martyrs. The villagers, haunted by the pain and unbearable stories of their loved ones, were driven to mental torment. Such terror that words fail to describe.
During this 20-year revolution, many people have suffered. No one had peaceful nights, no one had peaceful days, no child was safe, no woman was safe, no one at all. Even the animals were not safe. In these 20 years of revolution, so many raids have taken place, houses have been searched, ambushes have been set. People have been terrorized, they have come into homes. What else can they do? When even the animals are frightened. When they raided us, 13 were martyred and 17 were wounded. It was a day when the earth itself seemed to break. A dark night had fallen upon us. We rushed to one martyr, then another, to one wounded, then another. There were some we could not even reach. The hand of Almighty God had taken them. By God's will, those nights and days passed. Brother, about that Maulawi Sahib, the son of Mullah Sahib, just like my nephew Khan Wali was my nephew, my immediate nephew relative. He was martyred. Along with him, 4 others were martyred. This is the gist of the story. Thank God we are satisfied with sleep and also with bread. This was our greatest desire.
Ready, man. You got me? Back left side clear! Back left side clear! Jump fire! Trigger! Come!
The 20-year occupation marked the beginning of countless miseries in the country: nighttime raids, killings, torture, looting, being torn apart by dogs, the trampling of human dignity and Islamic values, and such brutality and savagery that even animals found no peace. These were all the horrors that had stolen the sleep from the eyes of the people.
This graveyard you see here is filled with the bodies of innocent civilians who were martyred during the past 20 years of occupation by the Americans and their puppet allies. These were ordinary people, taken from their homes or blown up on the roads with bombs. You can see this graveyard is now full because of them. These invading puppets and their local collaborators committed many atrocities in this area. They carried out night raids at different times, entering homes and targeting civilians. Many innocent people were martyred, and a great deal of cruelty was done to the locals. Let me tell you about some specific acts they committed. They set dogs on people, threw them from rooftops, dragged civilians out of their homes, and used them as human shields. They would walk them around the village and force them to carry heavy loads. Often, 2 people from a single home would be martyred in one incident. Women from this area were also injured. They also looted our belongings. Whatever valuables were in the house, they stole. Even the women's personal items were taken. This village has suffered immensely. It is a very oppressed place. The number of people who have been martyred here is truly high. The Americans committed their oppression, but it wasn't enough for them. They would raid us both day and night. During the day, the Americans would come, many of them, in vehicles, and they would launch attacks. They had machine guns with them and surrounded us from all sides. They riddled this hujra, gathering place, with bullets. They would search and interrogate us, asking who among us were the Taliban. Then they would inspect us further. But even that wasn't enough for them.
The occupation was like a dark night that buried the very identity of humanity beneath the soil. It brutalized people to the extent that not only their faces but also their names vanished. Even the holy imams of the mosques, who had committed no crime other than prayer and supplication, were not spared. Nighttime raids would force people to sit on the blanket of sorrow, but there were times when, in broad daylight, planes would rise and turn the land into Karbala. They say that God hadn't granted them survival, though the occupiers certainly did their utmost to ensure they didn't. The graveyards have been filled with the innocent martyrs of ordinary people. Every hill, where the missiles of death strike the tombstones, is a silent cry, a cry stained by the dark mark of the invaders' atrocities. This is not just a cemetery for the dead, it is a record of cruelty and terror etched on the pages of history. These sacrifices were not accidental. Here, the earth wept, the hearts of the stones exploded with grief, and the stars watched over their suffering. The elderly Uncle Juma Noor and the other villagers still remember the miseries, the raids, and the great calamities brought by the occupation. Yet, they express their gratitude and praise of Allah's mercy, saying that even when they had no food and were hungry, the peace that spread across their land was the greatest honor of all.
Now we are so happy because the night raids have stopped, and our fear is gone. Even if we can only eat once and then go without, we still feel happy. Because we are free from those raids. Back then, there were constant raids, bombs, and artillery shelling, not a single moment of peace.
This incident wounded the hearts of the people of Zazai-Aryub, but it did not break their pride. They carried the martyrs' bodies with tears and honor, presenting the world with a living image of the invaders' cruelty, terror, and barbarity. The Mujahideen witnessed all these events with their own eyes, casting a quick glance at everything. Yet, they could not withstand the storm of cruelty and terror unleashed by the invaders upon their brave people. Their cup of patience and endurance overflowed, and finally, they engaged in a great struggle against the occupiers, striving with all their might until the banner of occupation was torn down, and the Islamic Emirate once again raised the white flag of the country's independence and freedom.
Most of the time, the occupiers didn't raid just anywhere. They targeted weak spots where there were no mujahideen. So they committed many atrocities against civilians and caused great terror. They used to tie people to dogs, break down the doors of civilian homes, and beat and torture people inside their houses. When the mujahideen were near during a raid, they would force the civilians to accompany them for their own defense, and send them ahead and behind as protection. Whether it was snowing or winter, they would spend the nights like this, committing harsh abuses. They would keep people hungry and thirsty during the raids. They inflicted all kinds of cruelty on the people.
In the land of Zazai-Aryub, this is not the story of an attack or an incident, it is the unforgettable voice of the victims, pride, and a great struggle. The martyrs of this land created a living history and sent a message to the world. We will live on, we will keep every act of oppression and brutality by the occupiers engraved in our hearts, and this injustice will never be forgotten. The stories of the oppressions of the occupiers are forever preserved in the memory of history. Their cruelty, brutality, and barbarity will never be forgotten. But despite all the hardships, this land has now reached true justice, liberty, and independence. The proud Afghan people live in peace and prosperity under the leadership and shadow of a complete Sharia and Islamic system, spending their days and nights in happiness and well-being.
بلي مشالنا دي زړه داسیا وطن سریا پوتې غرونه دي زړه داسیا وطن سریا پوتې غرونه دي لالری جوهر لري مش لري گوهر لري دخت دي غرونه دي څوکول نختر لري دخت دي غرونه دي څوکول نختر لري.
As a national, independent, and dedicated media outlet, we reflect the voice of the people. And we present to citizens and the international community the atrocities, horrors, and crimes that occurred during the 20-year occupation of Afghanistan, in a documentary format. If you have also witnessed events such as raids, atrocities, horrors, or other crimes committed by foreign occupying forces during the 20-year occupation in your area, you can share them with us via WhatsApp. This will allow us to document them in both our national languages and in English and Arabic, prioritizing their broadcast on the national TV screen. Our contact number: 074 434 3668.